Hi.
Hello, Gabby. How are you?
Good. You.
Oh, there you go. Sweet.
Welcome to Get Real with Gab.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. I thought we'd talk about your, startup experience. So this is going to be a really organic conversation, warts and all. Feel free to swear if you want to. We don't filter anything in this, okay? But firstly, how are you? Are you good?
Yeah, doing well. I was sick back at the end of June, but kind of missed my birthday, but that's okay. But
Oh
doing well now.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Oh God, that would have sucked. I know you were struggling there for a bit. So
Yeah, I just postponed my birthday until like next week, and then we'll have it next week. So it's
yeah,
fun to
yeah.
move around.
Yep. You're heading to the States next week, are you?
No, back in October. So we head to the States in
Ah,
October for a couple of months. So that'll
okay,
be all.
October. Yeah, awesome. Wow. Well, I guess my first question I have for you is that I would really love you to talk about, obviously, with this journey with your startup, and just for people to understand what your startup is, I would really love you to give, a bit of a chat about quick safety and why you decided to start it. And I guess, why, obviously, when you did start it, why then? So, because
Yeah, yeah.
obviously, like most tech startups, are in their like 20s, just out of school. You're mature aged, so just like I was
You're
when I
being so
started out.
kind.
So, so I think this is going to be a really good warts and all about tech
Yeah.
startups, because I know my journey with our tech startup and just how brutal it was. And so I'd like to give our audience, rather than my very siloed, potentially negative, you know, journey of a tech startup, maybe someone else's perspective.
Okay, so quick safety. So quick safety, it's kind of hard to describe because we deal in an area that everybody uses every day,
Hmm.
but nobody really understands, and that's electricity.
Hmm.
So we basically can predict and prevent power faults and failures, electrical fires and electrocutions. So all of those things that happen, we can actually predict and prevent and tell the asset owner before that becomes an issue. So if you look at Notre Dame, it's probably the most notable one in the last couple of decades, right? So wiring doesn't last forever and it eventually decays, and especially in a building that old. And we could have told them before that caught on fire that that cable was going to fail and cause a potential fire and save that
Hmm.
building. So why did we start this? So my background, I was born and raised on a ranch in Wyoming. Was always, plugging holes and trying to fix things with very little tools and very little materials. So it was more of a reactive type of maintenance that we were doing on the ranch. And then I got into the Navy in 1980. I went into the U.S. Navy on nuclear submarines, and I was trained in digital and laser technology. Totally different
I was
than
going
looking
to
at.
say, like, nothing to what. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
actually, there is a connection, because obviously it's tech. So just, I guess, a different sort of tech, but kind of
yeah,
I can see the connection. Yeah.
yeah. I went from grassroots to high tech in a matter of a month,
Yeah.
which was really exciting, challenging as well. But when you're out to sea under the water in certain areas, and you just don't have the opportunity to surface and grab some parts off the nearest ship or whatever, so that mentality got me into the proactive way of doing things, right? Because I was
Mhm.
reactive originally all my life. Then I got switched into this mentality of, hey, we have to be doing things to make things proactive so that those incidents never happen, right? And if
Yeah.
they do happen, we have the ability to stop them in the shortest amount of time. So in that aspect, got out of the Navy, I came to Australia, actually came back to Australia, got engaged in the US to an Australian girl, came back, got married in Australia, and have been living in Australia now coming up on 37 years.
Wow. My next question was, so which do you prefer, Wyoming or Australia? But
Yeah,
I think that's pretty clear. So,
yeah, it's pretty obvious. I miss the Rocky Mountains, to be honest, but
yeah,
yeah, that's probably one of the only things.
it's on my list to see. And I noticed you've got your bison in the background because, like, I don't know about you, but probably one of my favorite shows is Longmire. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've
Oh
seen
yeah.
Longmire, the
Yeah.
Aussie guy. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love that show. Like I'll just watch it on repeat forever. And you know, my husband and I were going to do kind of a trip through the Rockies when we got to Canada, but just with visa and wildfires and all this other stuff going on, we decided we'd end up flying. So yeah, so it's still on my list. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You have to go. You have to go. We're actually making sure that we go back to Jackson Hole and Yellowstone
Nice.
this time. So yeah, it's going to be a great trip.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, so I mean, in Australia, I started working around the electrical industry, and I noticed this procedure that's being done every single time, and it was kind of being done. It wasn't being done, and that procedure is testing at the end of every job. So it's a federal and state mandate in Australia and most countries that when the electrician finishes, they have to do a series of tests because what they're dealing with is a killer, right? I mean, it'll burn your house down or it'll electrocute you or kill you, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be a set of procedures around that. And we have laws, rules, and regulations to protect that, right? The issue is that there's no oversight of that process. There's nobody checking that the electrician actually did that. And because of that, sad to say, this is my industry for 40 some odd years, 46 years plus, is that it's not being done. And that kind of, I don't want to use the word shocked because that's a pun, but it amazed me that this process wasn't being done. And so I started down a journey of saying, okay, you know, somebody should fix that. And then the things that we had happen here in Australia are the home insulation scheme, which the federal government give homeowners all this money to put insulation in their roofs to cut down electricity costs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened, but when they did that, they just let every Tom, Dick, and Harry
Yeah.
install, and they had massive issues because people were installing this insulation and actually stapling down through electrical cables and electrifying the entire ceiling
Oh,
of that
wow.
building. So in the end, I mean, that killed 7 tradesmen. And we lost the last tradesman only sadly about 3 or 4 years ago, right? And this thing happened like back in 2010 or earlier.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, why does that happen? And why does it continually happen? What's going on? So I started researching safety alerts and saying, well, how does an electrician get the information to save their lives and protect the asset? And I come to find out that they all count on their contractor, their employer, to give them that information at what we call a toolbox talk, right? So these toolbox talks happen, but then most of the contractors don't sign up for the alerts, and then those that do only sign up to one and think that they're covered. So we did an investigation on the back of Infinity cable that was brought into Australia from China, because that cable was recalled because once current ran through that cable, it melted the insulation off and then caused the asset to catch fire. So another
So,
massive, you know,
okay.
it
Someone's
was,
done their quality assurance. Hey.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's
Wow.
because we live in a global world, right? And I mean,
Mm.
everything's so easy to get,
Yeah.
and so bypassing a regulation or a standard is fairly easy to do. So I thought, oh my gosh, and that just caused untold heartache for everybody and loss of assets and everything from
Mm.
homes to commercial buildings. And so I thought, okay, we got to do something about this. So I started investigating it with a university. I got a bunch of engineers from a university, and we started analyzing the entire landscape across Australia and New Zealand. And
Did
come
you
to
get
find,
a grant for that, or you just
no, but we
no?
partnered with a university that actually gave me
Okay.
about 6 electrical engineers, which was
Yep.
amazing, right? Because this is early stage in our
Mm.
process. So we come to find out that there's not just one in every state. There's 23 across Australia and New Zealand that can put an alert that affects every electrician in every state across those 2 countries.
Yep.
So I said, well, Houston, we have a problem here, right? So we have to try to fix this. So I wanted to put out a safety alert system, but I thought, now, if I let electricians have this free on the App Store, it's just going to sit on their phone and they're never going to look at it, right?
Hmm.
So it's not going to do any good to anybody, right? You think you're doing something, but it's not really going to be of any effect.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, what if we tied the testing process? What if we did our due diligence and put out an app that allowed electricians to do their testing easier, faster, and secure, to make it them know that it did pass the state and federal standards, and to store that document as a court legal document for 7 years, because that's a requirement. So what if we wound all of that up, because they're using it, 3 to 5 times a day, and they'll see these alerts come in. So I started to go down that rabbit hole in 2009. I had to get away from this paper document that, if it is being used, that the electricians are signing with their signature. So I knew I had to approach 9 different state electrical regulators to get their approval to say, hey, what if we used a digital secure PIN by the electricians instead of this written signature? So that process took about 1.5 years to get that approval.
Yeah.
Because it was
Wow.
totally challenging to the regulators, right? Because they were like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm just thinking, technology back in 2009, like pins were probably in its infancy. It's almost, it's almost like Wi-Fi and all of that, having the technology to be able to cope with doing those processes as well. So yeah.
Totally. And so so at the end of that, mid 2011, I finally knew that I could actually build this product. So then 5 years passed and I finally got an opportunity to pitch the idea. Well, it was probably me being involved in other things, because I've run 3 previous businesses here in Australia. I've built up and run 3 different businesses, right? So I was very busy running my own business and carrying on. So there was a pitch opportunity put on by Blue Chili out of Sydney in Brisbane for funding to do your startup. So great, I'll pitch and see what happens, no harm, no foul. So first time I've ever pitched, got through the whole process, went through a whole different series of rounds, and was one of 4 companies chosen by the Queensland Small Business Small Business Innovation is what they called it. And it was put on by Chamber of Commerce Industry Queensland, Microsoft, Suncorp Metway, and Blue Chili. So we were one of 4 companies out of 380 or something that they started with that actually got into the accelerator and got funded. So that gave us our start. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was 2016.
Wow. So it's really interesting, because Jeremy and I lived in Brisbane he did grad school there. So he was there like from 2009. And then I think we left I left 2014. He left 2015, moved down to Wollongong. And it was really interesting, because when we started that whole process of obviously starting our startup up there, it was almost like, because they didn't have accelerator programs, they didn't have any of that. We ended up in an accelerator program out of I think it was South Australia, Adelaide. But it was like the year Jeremy left, suddenly all these accelerator programs started. And there was definitely no funding when we were doing what we were doing. How did you find the accelerator program? Did you find it was good, clunky, because they're very advanced now? Like it's very run off the back of venture capitalists, because they're obviously gearing them up to get funding from a venture capitalist, not an angel investor. It's kind of, so they're kind of structured that way now. So you can get the most out of utilizing that VC firm to give you capital. So how did you find it? Like, was it clunky, bit horse and buggy? Like,
well, like you said, I mean, it was right at the very start of that curve of the accelerators, right?
Yeah.
Blue Chili did an amazing job. I mean, having gone through different things in my life and knowing what's good and what's bad, I mean, I had 2 steep learning curves. One was a share-held business that I'd never been involved in before. And the other one is a technology business, which even though I come from a technology background in the Navy, this was in a different playing field, right? So those were two of my steep learning curves. And honestly, today I'm probably still learning, right? You never quit learning. But the accelerator from Blue Chili was amazing, right? And provided excellent insight and parameters, because from where I was at in my infancy with starting this share held business, it was a great start for the business. Couldn't have done it without it, right? Which was great. And we picked up in that initial offering, from day one, we picked up Artesian Venture Capital as a shareholder, right? So we had a VC sitting on our cap table from day one that Quick Safety was started. So that was exciting. And yeah, the accelerator went well. Since then, I've probably been involved in 5 accelerators, one even in the US.
How's that work? Like,
Yeah.
generally it's either one or none. So how did you manage to get into 5?
Yeah. Well,
and did you learn anything new from each of them, or was it?
Yeah, it was a different learning experience, because accelerators evolved and started doing different things and bringing different people in to talk and to mentor. So there was a learning addition, I guess you'd say, in every one of those accelerators, right? I don't count anyone as being a waste of time, but now I get bombarded by, send us your application, we want you in this accelerator, and I go, it's just not a good use of my time at the moment, right? I'm running a business, right? I'm trying to get this thing to the next level, and we're just at the cusp of something amazing. And I don't have time to be running away to an accelerator for 4, 6, 8 weeks, 6 months, whatever it is,
But the way I'd look at that is that if they're wanting you, like, the purpose of an accelerator is to, I guess, fast track your go to market to then catapult to sort of that next level. And so I guess the question would be, would it catapult you to that next level, or are you just, I guess, going around and doing the accelerator program to hopefully find an investor, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. And you're exactly right. And I think that's the main question that founders need to be asking themselves, is exactly what you said, is why am I doing this accelerator, and what are we going as a company to get out of that accelerator? That's a key question. It's not just a deal of, because every accelerator that I know of at the moment says, oh yeah, there's $100,000 US worth of funding or whatever. But when I look at those and I dig into most of those, I'm not saying all of them are like that, but most of those, you'll find that the ones that they want to back at the end of that accelerator process, they may offer you the 100,000. This is the one that I did in the US, was all this hype about funding and bringing all these investors in and getting you funded. Because I knew the investment landscape in the US is a lot more aggressive than what it is here in Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, very much so. And just on that note, like, I've been to quite a number of pitch nights last year in Sydney at some of the accelerator programs, because they're open to the public. Some of the ones that I was going were. And, you've got these great little businesses, and those pitch nights are there to obviously help them with their pitch and getting obviously the pitch right, but also there are opportunities for investment. And you look at that landscape, and probably out of the 10, 15, it'll be that one, and then the others have still got to slog, and they've still got to find. And look, a lot of them, when I say find, I didn't complete that, but I guess it's around market fit and scalability. And scalability in terms of, like, and some of these were fantastic, but my question was, and I wasn't there to invest, was, what does this look like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years time? What's that roadmap look like? Because at the moment I can't see it. Like, it looks like a great concept, but to get that buy-in from obviously consumers, I'm like, I don't know if this has got legs. They may keep tracking along. So so what are your thoughts on that?
For sure. Totally right. It's more about, um, you know, this is what we've experienced. So I'll talk from
Yeah.
our experience. So we've experienced that, like I said in the very beginning, we're dealing with a subject of electricity that no
Mhm.
one really understands the process, the regulations, the requirements, anything like that, which is why we've been on a huge educational track for
Yeah.
the last 5 years of bringing the product to market, right? Because we're trying to educate the public and say, listen, don't just pay your invoice to the electrician, right? Make sure you're getting the correct documentation that's a state and federal standard anyway that you should be
Mm.
getting. Make sure you're getting that to indemnify you and your family and your asset, right?
Yeah.
So ours was an educational piece, which gets us back to the investors, because if I was an investor, I wouldn't invest in deep space mining technology, right? Just
Mhm.
because I don't know anything about it, I can't bring anything to the table about that. Which is why in our investment, we find a lot of investors are excited about what we do because they go, "Oh my gosh, I never even realized that," right? And it's a big light
Mm.
bulb moment for them.
Yeah.
But because we operate in such a regulated industry, they go, I don't fully understand it, or I can't contribute to it, so therefore I'm not going to invest, right?
Mhm.
So it's our investor window, because if we were a Facebook app or a you know Photoshop app, whatever, people understand that, right? They understand what the users are and all that. Our users are basically any building that has power in it, right? So
Mhm.
everything from residential to defense to space, literally. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you're right about the investor landscape in that you have to be able to go to these events. If you're going to an event to pitch, you have to be sure that that event has that target market. Do everything that you can to invite those investors that you've had a conversation with or that that are in your laneway to that event, and do something yourself rather than just depend on whoever's promoting that event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's really hard when you're in that accelerator program as well, because you don't necessarily have a choice of the investor. And that
Mm,
investor, you know, may only deal with certain things. And so they're looking for something that aligns with that. And this is always the challenge when it comes to raising capital. Um, how have you looked outside of the box when it comes to raising capital?
yeah, so it's interesting because there's a lot of different options out there for founders nowadays. I
Mm.
mean, you've got heaps of different ways of having investors invest in your product or your company, other than I did back in 2016. Um, so whether you do crowdfunding or whatever, and once again, it depends on what you're doing, where you're going, and how you're going to get there as to who you actually bring. I guess one of the things that we've learned in this process is just because an investor is high net worth family or family office, whatever it is, or a VC, um, ensure you know and are clear of what they're going to do for you as a company.
Mhm.
Are they just investing in you just to ride the wave and then exit at their multiple or their time frame, and not going to contribute anything into that roadmap? Um, because contributions into your roadmap from people who are in industries that can really open a door for you or make a warm entry, um, are invaluable. They're more valuable than the cash itself, right?
Mm. Yeah. No, I
So
agree.
make sure you're paired up with companies that you know before they even invest, right? So somebody,
Yeah.
big VC comes in and says, "Yeah, we want to invest." Then sit down with them and say, "Well, okay, what are you going to give us? What are you going to do for us? How are you going to help accelerate our roadmap by being an investor in this company?" Right?
Yeah.
Because in those early days, I mean, you take family, friends, and I call them fanatics. A lot of people call it fools, but I like the term family, friends, and
Yeah.
fanatics. And you get them on board. And I've got amazing shareholders. Every one of my shareholders is amazing on the cap table.
Would you say that's due to a bit of luck, or you've just been very strategic?
luck in the early stage, strategic later on. It's
Yeah.
it's a learning curve, right?
Yeah.
So it was luck in those earlier stages. And then it became a plan because I knew from the things that we were experiencing as a company, what was good and what was bad. And in the earlier state, well, about midway, so probably about year 3, we had an opportunity to be invested with by, let's just say, a group. And we spent 3 months working with this group, finally come across with a term sheet, and the term sheet was totally different than what we talked about. And I said to him, I said, what is the deal here?
Mm.
We've been talking since day one. I said, this is the way it's going to be. And you guys have agreed. Now we get to the final cusp and we got all this money ready to invest. I'm ready to sign on the dotted line. And you put that back in there. I said, and so the lady who was thrown into the deep end, she was from that group, but she'd never been involved in our previous conversation. She goes, oh, so is this a deal breaker? And I said, without a doubt, it's a deal breaker. And we just shook hands and left, and that was it.
Wow, because that was going to be my next question, like obviously when you're in that mode of, I don't want to say desperation, but let's face it, startup founders are always desperate because, it's like, where am I going to put, food on the table? You're not getting paid. A lot of the time, investors don't want you to be paid. They just want you to work in it and sort it out. And are there any times where you've walked away from a deal or you've walked away because you obviously, when you spoke to them, wanted it one way and suddenly they wanted to cut the guts out of it and change your business model? Has that, that's obviously happened. Yeah.
You've got to be focused on what the priority is, because in hindsight, like now that's 5-6 years ago, right? So in hindsight now, I firmly believe that had we have taken that investment, that Quick Safety would not be a business today. That's how serious it is. Right?
Wow. And why do you say that? Just because they wanted to change the model, or?
Way too much control, way too much input. Now, I'm not a control freak and I don't know everything. I love people giving me advice and mentoring and all that. I love all of that. But if you're going to give advice in a highly regulated compliance industry and you're working over here in, let's just say, real estate, everything about real estate, and you're trying to run real estate ideas and principles into this tech business,
never going to work.
Business,
never going to work.
Right? Totally different mindsets and everything else. So they would have gained so much control that they would have just, and I have known in hindsight as well, I've known now fellow founders who have taken investment by that group, and they woe the day that they took investment from that group. You have to be wise.
Yeah. And I guess if there are people out there, especially, young tech startups who are, I guess they see the shiny lights, okay, we're getting investment. What advice would you actually give them around that? Because I know, we've been in situations similar and we've walked away, even though it was like critical at the time. It's like, oh my God, where are we going to get funding next? But what advice would you give to them? Because it's kind of like the devil the devil you don't know. So, know, and at the time you don't know because you're thinking, you get caught up with the dollar signs of, oh my God, this business is going to skyrocket. It's going to do this, it's going to do that. And, they want a seat at the table, and you don't understand what a seat at the table is.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to, I guess, those entrepreneurs, young or mature age, that are facing that situation with, VCs or potential angel investors or wherever their funding's coming from?
Yeah. I guess, first of all, you have to know what you know, right? So if you're going down a raise round, a safe note, convertible note, whatever it is, you have to know what that means and what it entails, the pros and cons for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then gather information from other founders who've been down that path, right? So in your networking, you're going to bump into more founders than you are probably investors, right?
Mm.
So establish those networks with other like-minded founders and utilize each other's information and each other's experience, because you don't have to go down those rabbit holes, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody else has already been down that rabbit hole and you feel that that's probably the same way this deal is going to go, then don't be afraid to walk away. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to walk away. Money is not everything. Correct investment is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the correct shareholders within your business, because they are on your cap table. They are going to remain there until they want to exit.
Mm-hmm.
People always said to me, an investor is like a marriage. And I was thinking, oh, I doubt that. but
Oh, no, it is.
yeah, that's right. So 9 years in, I was like, yeah, that's right. It is. It is. And like I said, I've been very blessed with fantastic shareholders that have basically, I've reached out for advice. They've given advice. I would have liked some of them to be more proactive, to be honest, which is why in the very beginning we talked about, if they are going to invest, understand what they're going to bring to the table and how they're going to assist you. But yeah, understand the landscape of what you're trying to do and achieve. And then one of the key things is for us is, in our pre-seed round, we had a raise round of 300,000, right? In a pre-seed round. We had a major international investor, VC, come to us and say, we want in. And I'm like, it was at a pitch event in Melbourne, right? I said, okay, that's good. So I had a meeting the next day. And one of the first questions he asked me was, he said, are you always going to be CEO? And without even drawing a breath, I said, not on your life. And
Yeah,
he says, you're the only founder I've ever talked to that doesn't want to remain CEO of the company. And I said, in my case, I've been CEO of 3 previous companies, right? So I can do that. Do I want to do that? Is that where my skill set is in this business? And that answer was no. So that really took him aside and really, established a good relationship. And we've got a good relationship to this day because of that question, right? Because it's just being honest. And you have to be honest with your investors, right? One of the downsides is, in an investment round, we oversubscribed that round by a little over 100,000. So we ended up closing for over 400. Now, one of the prerequisites in that investment was I had to draw a CEO's wage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the time, I was like, oh, hallelujah, this is great. This is wonderful. I finally get paid after all these years of not, earning a cent, trying to keep food on the family for my own table. I can draw a wage, and a good, reasonable wage. Hindsight, that was the worst decision I've probably made. Well, one of the worst. I've made a whole bunch, but you all learn. But that money would have been better used in driving the company rather than providing an income for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand the investor's mentality, because the investor said, I don't want you flying over to the Middle East and training in the Middle East for 1 and 2 weeks for 14, 15 weeks of the year, and then flying back to Australia, because that's what I was doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they said, we want you 110% focused on the business and driving the business. So that was the carrot to pull me 100% into the business. I think it's been a bad decision, but that's only in hindsight, right? I understand the mentality of why the investors did that. But getting back to your question is, the founders have to understand all the ramifications of their acceptance or denial from the investors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So school yourself up, learn, gather in people who've been down that road, ask on a forum, do whatever, right? Whoever you've got around you, just ask, because people are willing to give you the information.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They are. Yeah. So One of the questions I do want to ask you is that, okay, yes, you're mature age and you've transitioned into a tech startup. I guess, there's a lot of people out there that, are mature age and they're thinking, oh, I don't know if I can do it. The security, they may have a really great idea, don't know how to bring it to life. And again, starting a small business is very different to starting a tech startup, a startup in the true sense, as I call it.
Yeah.
So I guess, like, what's some of the advice you would give? Because it's so very different. It's like a small business on steroids, and you just, it's not like let's do a business canvas model. It's like, no, let's do financial modeling and three-way forecasts. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
because they will scrutinize the crap out of it, and then you'll have to probably redo them again, So I guess, for those people that, have great concepts and ideas, they may or may not have money. And I guess, my question is, did you find it hard to start this without investment? So, and I'm not sure if you put your own investment in, and especially if you are a mature age startup, you've got a great concept, you know that there's a market fit. And when I say market fit, because there's a lot of people that have a lot of ideas out there, but they're really solving a problem. Like yours is really solving a problem. Like when we met and you wanted your pitch deck done and all of that, and you told me what it was about, I'm like, holy crap, man, why hasn't someone developed this before? Like, you know what I mean? And when I was doing research, I'm like, shit, no one has developed this. Like, it just made sense, like from a tech perspective, So what advice would you give mature age people around that, especially if they didn't have cash, or they're too afraid to use their cash? Because look, I know for myself, with our tech startup, we put everything in. Like I was working at one point like 3 jobs. Every bit of savings we had, we were putting into it. And this is before, obviously, investors. I guess we tried to do everything ourselves within our reach, and then get a lot of freebies off people we knew who were skilled to do things. So what advice would you give?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's a great question to start with. There's 4 or 5 things that come to mind. I guess the biggest thing is no matter how old you are, one is don't start unless you're willing to go all in and finish. And that's why the statistics of startups failing is so high, right?
Yeah.
People say, oh yeah, this is it. I'm going to make $5 million in a year and then I'll just exit and I'll be fat and happy, right? So
never happens.
don't start, right? It's smoke and mirrors. Don't start, right? It's a hard slog, as you know, right? So and your point about you guys did yours bootstrapping in the beginning. I kind of reversed this in the last few years. So we took investment, lost equity in the beginning, and then now we started bootstrapping, right?
Yeah.
But the equity's gone.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a reverse engineering process that I don't know as if I would suggest it to everybody, right? It's much better off if you have the availability. So you either have 2 ways to go. You either bootstrap and get the product fit, product market, get all your acquisition and research is a major part. And I talked to a young kid outside the street in Brisbane about a week ago at an investment event. He's from the agriculture industry, young university kid, and we stayed out on the street. We just rode down the elevator together, and he started asking questions, and so he was wanting to know information. So I just give him all the information I had, right? And this is the whole thing about people willing to share that have been down those roads. And I said to him, I said, was taught earlier on, and that's a good thing about the accelerator I went into, was they said, when you go out to ask customers about your product, don't ask about your product.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, how do you do that? And so I actually was trained, I knew who my target at that stage was electrical contractors and electricians, right? And so I would go out and just start a general conversation with them about how's business going? What's up? What do you think the biggest issues in your industry is, and how are you solving those? And just generalized questions, right? If they did happen to hit on that electrical compliance sector, then we started to go down that rabbit hole a bit more focused, right? But I never led them. I didn't come up to them and says, hey, mate, I've got a good product that's going to solve all your needs across electrical appliance. You're going to remove the risk of your electricians. You're going to remove the risk for your business. It's going to seamlessly put everything together, remove your admin. And, everybody is going to be kind if you go down that path. They're going to say, yeah, sure, sounds great. I'll give it a go whenever you get it to market, just to get you out of their face, right? Because they just want to be kind.
Well, the first thing I was thinking of is like, what cult are you from? Like, like, okay, yes, I'll sign up. Just don't take my credit card,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's right. Exactly. Just let me get back to my lunch. That's fine.
yeah.
So that acquisition piece and that research piece is hugely important, because you have, and the information you get with that. So the information I got from my research was invaluable when I went out for money, because I had proof of people's names, the dates I talked to them.
Yeah.
And I didn't stand there with a notebook and go like this in front of them, right? And go, oh yeah, I've got to write that down, got to write this down. Or, oh, do you mind if I record this conversation? And then you record it, right? Don't do any of that. Just keep it in your head. You can remember stuff for 5 or 10 minutes. Say goodbye, walk around the corner, grab your voice recorder, notepad, whatever method you use, and write down the general information you just found out, and then put it into a spreadsheet later, and then categorize everything, and then you'll see the paths. And like I told this kid, I said, the thing that you're going to develop for the agriculture industry, you may find out through that customer research that that's not really an issue, that there's another issue that's related to that issue that you can pivot to quickly and easily to then gain a bigger market fit. And so there's that sort of thing. So, that acquisition research is amazing. But the other thing is to hold on to equity. Like I said, I give a lot of equity away at the front. And it's another thing that before you start a tech business or startup and you're going for investment, is know your equity structure and your dilution as you go along, right?
Yeah.
Because you can never get it back unless you invest and invest and invest and invest and invest more than the next round, right? In that aspect, just make sure that you know about that so that you can be aware. And if you're happy to do that, that's fine. I was happy to do that originally, and because I thought it was kind of an industry norm.
Yeah.
Looking
Well,
back,
that's what they tell you, though. That's the thing. It's almost like a given. It's almost like a rite of passage that the startup founder ends up not becoming a major shareholder, if that makes sense. And you don't really realize that until you kind of, there's a point in your startup where suddenly everything clicks, and the education of X years is just, it's almost like a light bulb moment of the detriment of all the things that you've done have led to that point of where you're at, if that makes sense. And then you're on a path that you can't actually change then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you guys in your startup invested your own financial money. So there's a sweat equity of what you do with yourself and your knowledge, right? But then there's a financial equity. And a lot of people don't have access to that. And that's what you got to work through, is how you're going to manage that. Some people do. Equity is the pivotal thing, right? The more equity you have, the better position you are, not only as a shareholder in the company, but for other investors. Because when major investors come in, they want to see founders with this huge amount of equity, right? Because they're in control, that they know that they've operated this business so far, ever how many years, has a bunch of equity left. So in our situation, like I said, we kind of reverse engineered it. So we bootstrapped toward the middle and latter part of the stage so far of quick safety. But so we've invested over 250,000 of our own money. And it was solely because we knew we had to get to the next stage to get to the next stage. And we needed it as fast as possible. But in saying that, now we've just released this $300,000 safe note to where we're trying to raise money quickly because we've got all these amazing partnerships with Simpro, Procore, Autodesk, and MRI software that is really catapulting us from that bottom-up approach of going through the industry upwards toward the asset owner to now driving it from the asset owner and the facilities management groups and construction groups down to the contractors and making them do that process. That's I guess the other thing for founders as well is one of the things I regret is not having the correct team around me from day one.
See, it's really hard though. Like I know for ourselves, like it was Jeremy and I, and we had like a bunch of people just helping us. But I mean, the good thing was like we understood what we couldn't do in the business in order even to get prototyping. And so we sought out people that could help us to do that, even though they weren't a part of the business. Yeah. It's really hard. Like I know, you know, especially in startup phase, and if you are raising capital, it's almost a given. That's the first thing they'll look at is who's your team, how experienced are they, what are they doing, you know what I mean? And that plays probably, I reckon, at least 50 or 60% of their reason for wanting to invest. And you know, if it's just you, how do you build that team, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, you hit on a good point there about having other people that you trusted to do the prototyping, right? So that's sort of interesting. So, all right, but for my own use case is I didn't come from originally was in a technical background, but hadn't been in for decades and decades, and was coming into an industry to where the product is technical, right? It's a software product. So I had to depend on outsourced work. I like telling the story, and you've probably heard this story already, but your listeners probably haven't, is the fact that when we had all these outsourced developers, I mean, they were super excited about the project. They loved what we were doing. They were engaged. You know, I did my own due diligence on who was good, who was bad. And they built this thing. It looked like a pig. It smelled like a pig. It acted like a pig. Did everything a pig would do, right? And I thought, great, this is awesome. And then we cut it open and it's a chicken. And you get to going, wait, I can't do anything more with this pig because it's a chicken. And then we got to develop a new pig, and then we did it again, and then it's another chicken, right? So unless you have somebody with that technical knowledge for the oversight of those outsourced developers or anything else, don't go down the same learning lessons that I did earlier on in the business, because earlier on in the business, that's all we faced was that time after time. So we've had like before we launched the CVP in 2019, we had 4 outsourced developer groups working on the project, right?
Wow.
Immense, right? So technical founder, sales, marketing, and your business person, your CEO type person, whoever that is. So those 4 things, even if they're not a founder and have skin in the game, have that knowledge of oversight by someone that you can have them oversee to make sure. I mean, I picked up a wonderful, I guess you'd call him a virtual CTO out of the US, and he come from a major, huge, I forget the software he was CTO of, but they moved to Canada from the US at one stage. And he said, no, I'm staying in Texas. And so I think we bumped into each other on LinkedIn or something. And he said, I'll give you a hand with it. He was overseeing teams in Mexico and Australia. Yeah. So, but he had a wealth of knowledge, and he was just into it because that was it. And I said, well, I would love to pay you $325,000 a year Australian that you'd need to come to Australia to work for me. But we just don't have that revenue, that capital, right? But yeah, you can find those people if you really search, and get them invested in it. talk about how they can be a part of the company and whether that's going to equal shares or revenue later or whatever. It's about gathering the wisdom around you to meet and succeed in your business.
Yeah, amazing. And so I guess, we're coming to a close. We've got like 6 minutes left of our hour chat. I guess, if you had to give some advice, and like there's so many more questions I want to ask you, but I guess if, there was one little bit of advice you wanted to give, whether it's a young tech startup, a mature age startup, or someone that's just, they can see a gap in the market and they just don't even know what the first step is. What bit of advice would you give them?
Holy dooly, that's a
Yeah,
tough.
I'm bringing out the big guns.
There's so many things.
Yeah.
I think it is, like I said, I mean, you have to understand your customers. Are they really a customer? Is it really a problem? And this is something you don't have to be in an accelerator to do this, right? We talked about customer research.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't have to be an accelerator. All you have to do is just jump out there to your potential customers and just start a conversation with them. Like I said, don't make it about what you're going to solve. Just start a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them about business. Ask them about issues in the, if it's along the admin HR stuff, we'll say, oh, how your admin HR team's tracking, and get them. And you'll find out that probably, unless it's something really rare, that they won't even bring up your area that you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to then gently steer them around to that department, to that area, to that issue. And then they might say, oh yeah, that's not an issue for us. We don't worry about that. We accept the risk. That's it.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, but you record that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's all market research.
Yeah. And that research will save you potentially years and years of heartache and no income and everything else because you're trying to flog this horse that's dead, that never was going to be a unicorn anyway, and try to do that. So I think probably that's the very first thing that every founder with an idea in their head can do, is just say, hey, don't talk about your product, don't talk about your problem. Gain the relationship first. Ask for their issues and problems. See if they bring it up. If they bring that up in the very first conversation, wow, that's amazing, right? That shows that you're really on to something that they have an issue with, that they know there's an issue with, right? A lot of stuff that we do is the fact that everybody thinks this process is happening.
Yeah.
When you challenge them to show, okay, well, where's your test documentation? They go, our what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, your test documentation that you're supposed to get. And they go, oh, we don't get anything.
Yeah, wow.
How are you going to indemnify yourself? I said, so how are you going to tell if your house burns down? How are you going to tell what electrician last worked on that circuit? And they go, oh, well, we only use this contractor. And I go, oh, that's it?
And we'll just ask him.
And then he'll put up his hand and say, oh, yeah, that was us. Fat chance, right? And commercial buildings, I mean, they got 5 or 6 different contractor groups in there, right? So even if you could tell that these 3 groups had been in your building in the last month, who's going to put up their hand? Nobody's going to put up their hand, right? So ask those questions in the very beginning to validate. I guess the bottom line is validate your idea, not just get it out of your head and out of your own mind of being a unicorn, and ask the question to the audience and see what the audience says.
Yeah. And I think one thing which we'll finish on is that, from my own perspective, not every startup's going to be that billion-dollar unicorn, but you can be your own unicorn within your own, expertise, if that makes sense, even with your business. And it's like I tell even small startups or even small business, aim to be your own unicorn rather than, trying to get to that $1 billion, because it's so rare to get to that. Like, I think like in the last, I think Australia alone hasn't produced a $1 billion unicorn in like 3 or 4 years. Like that's how hard it is to become a $1 billion unicorn. So you might as well at least try and get to, a unicorn of some sort, whatever that is for yourself, rather than, having that ideology that it's always going to be, yep, we're going to do it. And the chances of it is quite slim. So Kurt, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Maybe we should do a part 2 once you've done your capital raise, and we could talk about how your experience was with the capital raise, or I should say your safe note raise. So, but I've really appreciated your time today, Kurt. Thank you very much. Love what you're doing. You know I'm a big supporter of it. So, but thank you. Good luck with the safe note raise, and hopefully we'll get to chat again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Gab. All the very best to everybody.
Yeah, no worries. Bye.